This is Signal University's presentation of what is a Wi-Fi repeater. You'll learn a little bit about Wi-Fi and you'll learn why a repeater is necessary and why an access point might be better. First, let's ask the question, what is Wi-Fi? Wi-Fi is wireless communication under the IEEE 802.11 standard. That sounds like a lot of words and gibberish, but the important thing to know is that all Wi-Fi systems can work with each other on a very basic level. They may not all have the same features, but they can all work with each other. They're all designed to be simple to install, and another thing to know is that Wi-Fi is not just wireless Ethernet. The two systems, even though they act the same, are actually quite different. Now, why would you need a wireless repeater? There are several reasons that a wireless repeater would be used, especially in a home or small office. First of all, the FCC, the government agency that controls all radio broadcasting in the United States, has said that routers can't have more than a certain amount of power. So a single router may not be enough to cover a large area. On the other hand, even though you planned a beautiful mansion, you may have planned poorly when it came to your wireless setup. You may have put your wireless router in one part of the house, and you may need wireless access throughout the entire house. There are two different kinds of wireless devices, repeaters and access points. A repeater rebroadcasts a wireless signal. In other words, it takes it from your router and then rebroadcasts it out. It's not a direct connection. An access point takes a wired signal, turns it into a wireless signal. This is important to understand the difference because a repeater is going to basically just repeat what it hears wirelessly, and an access point is going to change wired to wireless. Just by looking at them, though, it's very hard to know which one is which. Just so you're aware, the one on the left is a repeater, the one on the right is an access point. Here's what a repeater does for you. When you connect to a repeater, it'll be about as far away as it can be from your router and still get signal. There will be a wireless signal that goes from your router to the repeater, and the repeater itself is going to create a second wireless signal that's going to go throughout the area that it covers. There will be two separate wireless networks. You can call them anything you want. I just called them home and repeater so you understand that they are in fact different. Setup for every repeater is going to be completely different, and that's why it's very important to read the manual. They all start with proper placement. Place that repeater as far away as it can go from the router and still get wireless signal. Use your cell phone or tablet to try to determine where the Wi-Fi falls off. As I said, read that manual. Reading the manual is going to be the one guaranteed way to understand how this repeater works because every single one is going to be different. You may need a cable and a computer to set up that wireless repeater the first time. Some of them can be done by a PC wirelessly, but for the most part, what you do is you connect them once, get it all configured, and then it's wireless from that point on. Now let's talk about access points. An access point is different from a repeater because it changes a wired signal into wireless. It starts with your router and that access point. From there, an Ethernet cable goes between the two. Sometimes that Ethernet cable also carries power, but one way or the other, it's going to be a wired connection between the router and the access point. And the access point is going to broadcast that Wi-Fi signal. Sometimes you can leave the Wi-Fi on the router, but you can also turn it off and have the access point be your only source of Wi-Fi. Let's talk for a second about power over Ethernet. This is a completely safe way to send power to your access point. Remember, everything is going to need power, and the access point may not be somewhere where you plug it in. A lot of times access points are put on the ceiling. By using power over Ethernet, two of the pins in that connector are used to carry power. They're otherwise not used, so it's not a problem. Something called a power over Ethernet injector is used, where you run a wire to it from your router, you plug that injector into the wall, and then you run another wire out to the access point. Basic setup for an access point isn't terribly different from setup for a repeater, except for sometimes it does involve power over Ethernet settings. Remember, every access point is going to be different. Every access point is going to have its own setup routine. Every access point is going to have a different range, and that's why it is important to read that manual. Connect whatever power source, whether it's power over Ethernet or just a regular plug, into the access point and connect it with an Ethernet cable. Finally, almost every access point is going to set up using a program on your computer. Most access points will not set up using a tablet or smartphone. You'll need an actual computer to do it. Now that you understand the difference between a repeater and an access point, let's talk about why you would choose one over the other. Repeaters are usually a lot less expensive than access points, and that's an important consideration. They're wireless, so they can go anywhere that you have an outlet. That makes it very easy to install and very quick. On the other hand, an access point usually is more powerful and is going to cover a wider area. It's more flexible as far as installation options, and you can mount it anywhere that you can get that wire to, as opposed to just having to rely on where there's an outlet. Finally, and this is most important, you can have one wireless network name throughout your entire house, no matter how many access points you have. You can't do that with repeaters. With repeaters, you would need a different network for every repeater, and that means that you have to connect to one or the other. It can be frustrating. Now let's talk about mesh systems. A mesh system is where you use more than one access point spaced throughout a large area. And even though they overlap, they're designed to give a blanket of wireless coverage in such a way that a person doesn't even realize that they're going from access point to access point. If you've ever been in a mall or a store that has free Wi-Fi, chances are it's on a mesh system because one access point isn't going to cover that large area. Setting up a mesh system can be different from manufacturer to manufacturer. They all start with planning. Try to get a good idea of where you're going to need to put those access points. Try to figure out using your cell phone, a tablet, or even better, some sort of professional signal meter, exactly what the limits are. You don't want too much overlap because it's going to be just wasted. You're wasting time in putting up extra access points, and you're wasting money on them too. Lay down all the wires. Remember, every access point is going to need an Ethernet cable. And if it's not using power over Ethernet, it's going to need AC power. Finally, access points used in a mesh system, just like ones used in a non-mesh system, are going to need you to run a program on your computer that gets them all set up. Generally, you can't do this on a cell phone or tablet. There's a special kind of wireless network called point-to-point wireless. This is something that is used to bridge a large gap where laying a wire wouldn't make a lot of sense. For example, let's say you're trying to create a network between two buildings on the opposite sides of the street. You can use a point-to-point wireless system to create that network instead of running a big wire underneath the street or across a pole or something like that. Two very special purpose access points are used, and they connect wirelessly. But what you need to know is they do not connect wirelessly to anything else. They only connect to each other, and the effect is like having one long network cable between them. Remember, when it comes to wireless networking of all kinds, all systems are different. It's important that you read that manual to understand what you've gotten yourself into. Go with a manufacturer that you trust, and don't be afraid to experiment a little bit to try to get the best possible range. If you still have questions at the end of this tutorial, remember, you can always go to forums.solidsignal.com and ask that question of our professional support staff and peer support team. You can go to live chat at solidsignal.com, or during business hours, you can call 877-312-4547.